So this sentence, お酒を飲みますか? Are you gonna drink alcohol? Doesn't quite sound right because when I hear this sentence, I think about a situation like you're going to an izakaya with your boss with ominous eyes, and you're trying to get her drunk because you want her to spill the beans. So you say, お酒飲みますか? Do you want to drink some alcohol? And hope she will, except that she never gets drunk, so your plan doesn't work. But in this context, o doesn't quite work here, so we simply say お酒飲みますか without using o. And o is a pretty interesting particle because in a simple sentence like this, we use o rarely, but in longer sentences we do. For example, if you want to emphasize お酒, alcohol, it's like, hey, it's Friday night, we don't have work tomorrow, so maybe we should drink alcohol instead of soft drinks. You can say ソフトドリンクじゃなくてお酒を飲みますか? I guess we should drink alcohol instead of soft drinks. And the nuance here is it is alcoholic beverage that we should drink, not soft drinks. Because you are trying to get her drunk. And also in this situation, we are talking about we instead of just you. So this is another important context. And yet another situation where we would use を飲む, it's something like お酒を飲むんですか? What? Are you drinking alcohol? And using an expression like です can change what particles we use. And the kind of situation where you would say this is you have a colleague, for example, who only drinks tomato juice. But for some reason today, she's drinking alcohol. So you say, お酒を飲むんですか? What? Are you gonna drink alcohol? So the emphasis here is like, it is alcohol you're drinking instead of tomato juice? And you can also not use お and just say, お酒飲むんですか? With less emphasis on お酒. For example, it's lunchtime and they say, let's drink. And you go, お酒飲むんですか? Are we gonna drink alcohol? So that's the kind of situation. Or when you use words like 何, what, and say, 何を飲みますか? What are you gonna drink? We'd use お. And in this case, 何飲みますか works too. Except that I would say the difference between 何を飲みますか with お and 何飲みますか without お, the difference is not that big. And it's partly because お is the only particle you can insert here, 何を. But in the other examples, there are other possible particles. For example, ビールは飲まないけどワインは飲むんですか? You're not drinking beer, but you're drinking wine? And here we are using は for contrast. So は飲む is also possible. But with 何を飲みますか? There's no situations where we would use は or other particles. Within reason, because you can probably think of some weird situations. So that makes using お not very significant. But here's the thing. It totally depends on the context if お酒を飲みますか makes sense. And also if you add words like 何 or if you use expressions like です it can change what particles we choose. But there's a bigger problem here because I have this book which has the official translations of Minna no Nihongo examples. And this sentence, お酒を飲みますか is supposed to mean, do you drink alcohol? As in, do you usually drink alcohol? So it's not about, are you going to drink alcohol today? It's about what you usually do. And in that case, saying お酒飲みますか without adding any other context doesn't really make sense. I've asked other native speakers, and they all think that this sentence is trying to say, are you going to drink alcohol or do you want to drink alcohol? So this is quite a plot twist that can match episode 3 of Madomagi. So if you want to say, do you drink alcohol? How would you say that in Japanese, or what extra context do we need? Well, one thing you can do is add the word 普段, like usually, normally, and say 普段お酒飲みますか? Do you usually drink alcohol? And this makes it clear that it's about a habit, or what you normally do. And if you want to insert a particle here, it's going to be は instead of お. So you can say 普段お酒は飲みますか? Do you usually drink alcohol? And if it's like a formal interview, you might use は. Or if it's a casual conversation, you can use て and say 普段お酒って飲みますか? Do you normally drink alcohol? And because we don't have any other context other than the sentence itself, adding words like 普段 can clarify what it means. But if you already have an established context, for example, you go see a doctor and the doctor is asking health-related questions like タバコは吸いますか? Do you smoke? お酒は飲みますか? Do you drink? And because you already have this context, you don't need to add words like 普段 to make it clear. But still, in this kind of conversational context, o is a very unlikely particle. And if you look at Minna no Nihongo, it's very clear this is a conversation, right? Two people are talking to each other. And speaking of context, a question has a different context from a statement. For example, if somebody asks you, 普段何飲みますか? What do you usually drink? You can actually say, お酒を飲みます. I drink alcohol using o. And this is a statement. And here a more common way of saying this is not using o and just say お酒飲みます. But using o is fine here. It doesn't sound weird. But if you make this a question, お酒飲みますか? Do you drink alcohol? It's a different context. And in Japanese, if you turn a statement like お酒を飲みます into a question, お酒飲みますか? You can't always use the same particle because the context is different now. And even though Japanese teachers usually don't really talk about this, if you look at a more serious native level grammar research papers, they sometimes discuss this. So if somebody says, oh, but textbooks teach you the correct particle so that you can drop it later on, well, it doesn't always work like this because o isn't the correct particle here because what the correct particle is depends on the context. But it also means in some other context, お酒を飲みますか can be fine. And one example is actually a questionnaire. You know, if you go visit a clinic in Japan, they will often give you a medical questionnaire. And I actually search for real life questionnaires, and sometimes they do use o and say, お酒を飲みますか? Do you drink alcohol? And sometimes they use wa and say, お酒を飲みますか? And you have to remember that the way we write Japanese is not exactly the same as the way we speak Japanese. So speaking, writing, formal writing, or questionnaires like this, they have all different contexts, and that can affect the way we use particles. And if you Google search お飲みますか, you can find some examples, but you have to think of the context. In what context does this sentence exist? Like, it's okay for Naruto to say だってばよ in the context of anime. But if you say だってばよ in real life, that's just cringe. So if you want to be good at Japanese, it's important that your examples use the right particles in the right context. So maybe you can subscribe to my email group because I have both free and paid lessons where I will help you acquire natural and practical Japanese with lots of examples that use the correct particles in the correct situations. So click on the link on the screen or in the description and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta. またね